Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another week on Going to Ground. These short films that I thought would only last a couple of weeks or so, but I think we're at about number 80 today. Hard to believe that. I'm going to keep going if that's of interest to you. I think I shall carry on as long as I can. It's been a lovely way of connecting with you all, and I do hope that they've been helpful to you. Thank you for the correspondence that I receive about these films. I've just seen a heron going overhead, which is a lovely, rare, delightful sight. A heron, always slightly smaller than I think it's going to be. They're all legs and neck, aren't they, herons? Its head was tucked back into its body in an S shape. And actually, in terms of body and wingspan, no bigger than a kite, but a beautiful sight, arrowing the sky in a straight line past me. Now, after my slightly wobbly rendition of St. Patrick's breastplate yesterday, I began to speak a little about this theme of living together as a body, as a society, as a community, which is our theme really in these long weeks of Trinity that now stretch out before us. How do we live for Christ together in ordinary life, in ordinary time, as the season's often called? That's not easy. Society is like the sea, isn't it? It's ungovernable. It is very hard to find one's place within it. How do we lead this turbulent people? And often our turmoil is for very good reason. But you may, like me, have seen the news and social media over the last few days and think, where do we go from here? How do we lead? How do we find ways of being together, one body, given how we are now? That is an incredible challenge. And I've found in reflection on this, particularly with today's reading, myself brought back to looking to my own responsibility to act as a neighbour. And that's partly because today's reading in the Church of England's cycle of readings, the lectionary as it's called, is the Good Samaritan. And what begins in that story, as you know, this is at the heart of the story. It begins as a challenge to Jesus of one kind: who is my neighbour? The man wants to justify himself by finding a sphere of people with whom it is legitimate to live peaceably. And it ends with Jesus turning the question right round the other way, as he often did, and saying, who was a neighbour to the man who fell in with the robbers? Not who is a neighbour to me, but who was a neighbour to the troubled man. And so the lesson of that, or one of the lessons of that great parable, is that neighbourhood is not so much a sphere outside ourselves as something that we create, that we delimit, that we shape and form by our own actions, by our own neighbourliness. That is what makes a neighbourhood and a neighbour. And so I'm compelled to look to my own actions first. And I felt over these last couple of days, all I can do is to be loving and to try and turn my own attention out to the needs of others and do my best to serve my neighbour and love my neighbour as I love God. That's the heart of it, isn't it? That's the summary of the whole law and commandments. Not a very profound insight, but it does return us to where we begin, which is our own responsibility to live with others under God's grace and care. So I just wanted to say that this morning, and to finish by reading the psalm that's in the prayer book for today, just a part of Psalm 39, and it begins thus. I said, I will take heed to my ways. that I offend not in my tongue. I will keep my mouth as it were with a bridle, while the ungodly is in my sight. I held my tongue and spake nothing. I kept silence, yea, even from good words, but it was pain and grief to me. My heart was hot within me. And while I was thus musing, the fire kindled, and at the last I spake with my tongue. Lord, let me know mine end, and the number of my days, that I may be certified how long I have to live. Behold, thou hast made my days as it were a span long, and mine age is even as nothing in respect of thee. And verily every man living is altogether vanity. For man walketh in a vain shadow, and disquieteth himself in vain. He heapeth up riches, and cannot tell who shall gather them. And now, Lord, what is my hope? Truly, my hope is even in thee. Man walketh in a vain shadow. That was the line that struck me. Not just because it's poetic, but because our preoccupations are so often vain, turned in on ourselves. If we want to fly straight through the turbulent winds and times that we live in, we need to be turned out towards our neighbour. May each of us take up that responsibility today. God bless you as you go to